Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Adoption Dialogue, the program about all things adoption, the joys, the challenges, and the many, many complexities. This evening, we have a very interesting conversation, which I think you'll find very interesting indeed, because it's discussing fostering, which, as we know, is an arm in the adoption umbrella, also referred to as a form of permanency, fostering. So we have a wonderful interview that Auntie Sally gear up for us now. And it's interviewing a lady named Suzy, who's been on the fostering journey. And we think it will be very important for folks to start to get an insight into what the fostering is all about, because we all have perceived notions and ideas of these things, but it's really important to really hear from folks who are living it, who have done it, who have been in the process of it. So we look forward to sharing this episode with you. As always, we welcome your questions and comments. We actually have Suzy live with us here, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today, Suzy. And we invite you to put your comments and questions in the chat box as always, and we will read those out at the end. And if anything comes to mind as you're watching, please do note it down, and we will be happy to answer those questions. Without further ado, we'd like to present Adoption Dialogue.
Thank you, Judith. Suzy is a foster carer. And as I said, if you've never thought about fostering, you need to listen to what Suzy has to say. I heard her, and I think it put a completely different flavor to fostering. Welcome. Suzy is a foster carer, and she's going to tell us how many years she's been fostering for. It's wonderful to come across foster carers because there are just not enough of them. And there's so many children in the care system right now who need foster care. And especially, we need a lot of Black foster carers because we don't have enough of them. So Suzy is going to tell us a little bit about how she got into fostering and what about her background prepared her for fostering. And then perhaps I'm hoping that when you've heard what Suzy has to say, you might be persuaded to become a foster carer too. So Suzy, welcome to Adoption Dialogue.
Thank you, Auntie Sally. I got into fostering in 2013. I started fostering, and I had my best friend at the time. She was my maid of honor when I got married. She had been in care. Her mother had died when she was 60, and she felt she could not live with her father. So she actually took herself down to the local authority and presented herself and literally said to them, "My mum's died and I need to be cared for." I did ask her why she did it, and she said she knew that she was not wise enough at 16 to look after herself. She said she needed a home. And then fast forward, we went to her foster carer's, I think, 40th birthday at the time. She had left care, and we went to the foster carer's 40th birthday. And she always said the impact the carer had on her was so huge, it changed her life. The foster carer had prepared her for adulthood. The foster carer had prepared her when she got her first flat, showed her how to buy pots and pans, bought bed sheets, help her set it up. Because she had a home, she could come somewhere. She didn't have to be on the streets, didn't have to hang around in other people's homes. She could come somewhere where she felt safe. And so we both said, we will do fostering. One day we will do the same for somebody else. We'll pay it forward. And that's how I became a foster carer.
You know, that's one of the most beautiful stories of fostering I've heard, because not all of them turn out as wonderful as hers did. She's been very, very lucky, actually, to have a foster carer who made such a positive impact on her. So clearly, not only was the decision she made the right one, but she was also lucky enough to get into the right foster home. That's wonderful. And you actually fulfilled the dream after experience. You did. So what were the steps towards getting into foster care? I know you decided a long time ago you wanted to do it. Then once you'd made up your mind that you wanted to do it, what were the steps that you took to actually become a foster carer?
So it's interesting because we'd had that conversation, and then as you do, life moves on. And then one day, my husband at the time, I'm now divorced, but my husband at the time, my ex-husband, came to me. He didn't know about this conversation, but he came to me with a newspaper for an advert for fostering, and he pointed to it. And it just took me back to the conversation, and I said, yeah. So we called up the agency. They came and they inspected our house. We had a spare room. And then they started a process, which is an interview process. It's called the Form F, which you have to fill out. It takes, now the government has reduced the time it takes to a maximum of 6 months. But at the time, ours took a year and a half because they had so many questions to ask. It's very intrusive, but you have to remember you are taking in vulnerable children, so they need to be very sure that you're qualified to do that and you have a safe environment. And not just do you have a safe environment, your background safe as well. The people around you are safe as well. People who the children will come in contact with are safe.
I know you found it. You said it was intrusive, but were you ready for that? Or you were a bit surprised?
I wasn't surprised actually, but I was ready and I did feel it was necessary because I wasn't offended or anything. I just thought, we're going to be looking after children. And if my child was to go to somebody's home, I would want to make sure the people were thoroughly vetted. I felt it was necessary.
That's nice. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people find it a bit uncomfortable, but it sounds to me like you were ready for it. So once you'd made a decision, they came to you, they discussed the format, 1.5 years it took. And then you would have been taken to panel. Were you nervous when you were going to be taken to panel?
Oh yeah, my first panel, because we wanted to do fostering. So when you want to do it, you want to pass the panel, you want them to say yes. So with everything that's important to you, you're nervous about it. But I think once the interview started, I relaxed and, I have this thing I actually got from Oprah, which is be yourself. So I always try to be myself. And that's just what I did at panel because I thought they need to see who I am and the authentic me. And if they say yes to that, then it means I'm qualified.
Absolutely. And interesting because one of the other things is the social worker that you had would have written a report about you to take to
Yeah.
panel. Did you get to read that report before it went to panel? Do you remember?
I think I did, yes. It was so long ago, but I'm sure I did because what they
Yeah.
said in panel was familiar to me. And yeah, I wasn't surprised by anything they discussed. So I think I did, yes.
You're quite happy with it.
Oh, yeah.
Was it a social worker you got on with? Oh,
I didn't actually know her. Obviously, I was new, but I did get on with, I tend to get on with most people. And it was a professional relationship. She was interviewing me for a job. So, I had to do my part and she did her part.
and between the two of you, because you have professional respect between you, everything worked out very well.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's an important thing because sometimes people tend to bring their emotions into it. And so then that kind of messes everything up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, with fostering, you need to be child-centered. So from the onset, I was not thinking about myself. I was thinking about the process and what we needed to do to be good foster carers. And that's what I did. Just answered the question, cooperated, and made sure we worked with the professional.
Yeah, because that's what happens along the line during the course of
Yeah.
the fostering. And also the thing is when you would have been told about the type of children you'd be fostering and they were not going to be angels by any means. Did that scare you at all?
Funny enough, I wasn't told. And later on,
You
actually,
were
I've
not
got a funny story.
you
I
were
got
not
told,
told.
not to the degree of what,
You were to discover later on.
I was to discover later on. And I'm glad I wasn't told because we're dealing with vulnerable children. And I wouldn't have wanted to be put off because I would have lost so much if they scared me out of it early.
When you
So
say you lost so much of what?
was the experience, the fostering experience.
The enriching experience you had from it. Oh, I see, yes.
And the impact I've had on children over the years. So I'm glad they did not scare me off.
So when you became a foster carer, you experienced it. What was it you experienced made you wake up to the reality?
Okay, so I didn't realize the need the children would come with, the depths of the need they'll come with. Be looking after children, sometimes they have not been taught what they needed to be taught at 1. They had not been taught what they needed to be taught at 2, 3, 4, and 5. I had a 10-year-old who did not know how to bath. I didn't realize they didn't know how to bath. And I had to literally teach them how to bath at 10 years old. And nothing prepares you for things like because they've skipped so much, they've missed so much in their learning and their development. So what you would expect a 10-year-old to do, they might not be able to do it. And you have to be so patient because teaching them does not come quickly because they haven't had repetitive parenting, good parenting that will show them how to listen and how to follow instructions. Sometimes they'll forget. I had children who there'll be something on the floor and they'll walk over it. And you'd think Can you not see it? And they literally did not see it because back home they were walking over things all the time. It's not because they didn't want to pick it up, because they are used to not picking things up. So it's a process. So you have to be very patient as a foster carer. That's just one example.
Did it come easily to you, the patience that you needed to be able to do this?
It's a process.
For
We
you as
have,
well?
yeah, definitely. It's a process. And the patience I have now is nowhere near the patience I started with. It's a process. And with fostering, it's a community. You don't foster in isolation. There's training, there's other carers that you can call for support, there's social workers. So as you go along, you develop, and when you hear other people's story and how they've handled it, it adds to your set of tools that you have to use. And patience is just one of those tools, and it grows, it gets better, you fine tune it.
Sounds like your community, you had a support group of foster carers. That would have been a great one for you, from what
Oh
you're saying.
yeah, I still do. I mean, now I have a particular carer. We bounce off each other. If she has a problem, she'll call me and she'll say, this is going on. What do you think? And I'll do the same. And sometimes I'll refer her to her social worker. I'd say, well, speak to the social worker about it. Speak to a professional, call a meeting, do what you need to do. But there's always support. There's always support. There's always an on-duty social worker you can run things by. You're never alone.
So what is the most difficult situation that you've ever had to deal with?
Well, there's just been a few, but I don't look at the situations. I look at how I can help the child, because it's a child and you have to think of the child.
Yeah.
This is a child that has not been equipped with what we had growing up. So you have to look at their need and how we can meet it. I had a child, I'll give you an example. I had a child who I had a quilt for them, and they'll never sleep on the quilt. Regardless of how cold it got in winter, they would sleep on top of the quilt and they would not use the quilt. And it wasn't until I spoke to the social worker and I kept saying to her, use the quilt, I'll put the quilt over her. You go back into the bedroom that she's taking it off. And I said to the social worker, explain what happened. And it turned out that they didn't have quilts, blankets, or bed covers. So they were used to sleeping without covering.
Regardless of how cold it is.
Regardless of how cold it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because
that's heartbreaking when you think about.
And when you realize the reason why she's not doing it, and without asking, you wouldn't have known.
And there's always a reason why. And that's what we need to try and piece together. They're called triggers. There's things that happened in their past that will be showing now, but you won't know why. You think, why are they doing that? But it's because of something in the past. Another example was I had a child who, just before we were going to school and she's eating her breakfast, she'll eat very slowly and she'll just eat very, very slowly. She knows you're in a hurry, but she'll eat very slowly. But that's because when she did it at home, she got told off and it started something. And it was an attention-seeking mechanism that she was using. So I would just say to her, if you don't want to eat, just let me know so we can go. And then she'll start eating quickly because I didn't respond to her bait, so to say. So things like you have to think beyond what they're doing. Just sort of use psychology really to try and get them to cope better or do things in a different way. Doesn't always work.
Trial and error, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about school? I mean, obviously, you'd have to be advocating for them at school on a number of occasions, especially with all these challenges that you're experiencing at home. First of all, you've got the transition of them wherever they were before. They've now come to you, which means they're now going to be in a new school. So you have to start advocating from them from the minute they come to you into entering into school. Tell us what that is like.
I work very closely with school. One of the children I had, when they came, they were constantly kicked out of class. It was a daily thing. They were just always kicked out of class and sent to reception. I think they were in year 4 at the time. And they'll be sent to reception to go and play with the reception children. And I thought, this is impacting the education. This cannot go on. So I said to the school, if you have an issue, give me a call and I'll come down. And in the first week, it started happening. And I went into school and I just had a very firm word with him. And I said to them, if you do this, you will get X, Y, Z when you get home, which is PlayStation or Xbox or whatever you're playing with. And that worked. But as time goes on, you have to have a balance because I also don't want to always be bringing school issues home. So there are times when I'd say to school, you have to put the sanctions in because I don't always want to be the bad cop, so to speak. So it's just really working closely with the school. I have regular meetings, regular phone calls. The school know me personally. I make myself known. If there's an issue, they'll just call me and we can work it out together. Sometimes we have to put reports in place. I had a child who used to come home late. So we put something in called a homeschool report. I will tell them what time this child left. They'll tell me what time they arrived at school and vice versa. And we work together that way to let the child know that we are cooperating, we're in unison, and that our eye is on them. And really, what children want to know is that you care. If they don't turn up, you're going to ask why. You're not just going to leave them to the streets. They might not show it, but that's what they like. They like structure. I said to my children, I often ask them sometimes, describe me, and they say, you're firm but fair.
That's nice. And I was just saying, making a point here, when you give them the structure, it actually makes them feel safe.
Yes.
Because remember, in the past, they may have lived in a home of neglect or chaotic household where there's no structure and therefore they can't predict what's going to happen next. But when you have structure and they're able to predict what's going to happen, it gives them a sense of control.
It really does.
And
It does.
you find moderates their behavior as well, having in place.
Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they will push you to see if you will give up on them. Because there are children who will push you to see if you're real, if you'll give up on them. And you just have to persevere. As foster carers, you need to know your limit as well. But there are children who will push you and they're just screaming out for attention, for somebody to say, I'm not going to give up on you. You're here and you're stuck with me. And
does that reassure them? You're stuck with me. I'm not going to push you.
I think it does, but it doesn't stop them pushing their luck sometimes. But you know, what I always say is that children are children and they behave in a way not because they're in care. Some children, same way they behave, our birth children behave that way as well. You know what I mean? You cannot label a child's behavior as is because they're in care. It's not. Sometimes it's just the way they are. And if they were your birth children, you have to deal with it. There is a framework around fostering that limits the way we treat children, and quite rightly so, because they've come from traumatic backgrounds. We have to make more allowances for them. But yet still, there is a way you can conduct yourself. You can produce productive and healthy adults at the end of the day. My philosophy, which I always say to the professionals, is if I bump into a child I looked after on the road, I'd want them to look at me and know that I did good.
Can you say that right now?
They will tell you. I've had children that I've had to let go because I think they needed more help than what I could give them. And sometimes that's just, you have to know your limits, and you have to know. I mean, there's children that I've said to the social worker, I think they need this type of carer because they would respond to this type of carer.
But it's good to know at least your strengths and what you're capable of doing. Yeah. And I think that's important. And I think because that way as well, it enables you to approach foster care in a very objective way without getting emotionally caught up in it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's very important to know what your limits are.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about photographs, because photographs are another issue, aren't they? Tell us about that, where children in care are concerned.
So where children in care are concerned, you're not able to put them on social media. You're not able to have their photograph published to the public without permission from the local authority. So for instance, I have a child who belongs to a football team, and every year they took a group photo, but we would have to get their face blurred out. We didn't want them to feel different by not taking the photo, but we would blur it out slightly so they couldn't be recognized. The child never noticed it.
The child didn't notice it.
Oh,
that's cleverly done then. Yeah.
They didn't point it out to them. They just saw the picture and thought, oh, team photo, but they didn't really look.
That's brilliant.
So things like that. You're always trying to make sure that it's inclusive. So saying to them, stand aside, you can't take this picture, that everyone's going to be like, why?
Yeah, it puts
They don't
attention on them.
children don't want people to know. Some children don't want people to know they're in care. So they'll take the photo, but then we'll have it adjusted slightly to protect them.
But what about the children who choose to go onto social media themselves? What do you do? How do you manage that?
Well, if I saw a child in my care on social media, I will report it to the social worker, to the authorities, and then they will take it up and speak to them. Because obviously there are laws around the ages children can go on social media. And with children in care, we have to stick to it
Yeah,
because
they're vulnerable.
yeah, if they're vulnerable, so we have to stick to it. I mean, things also like watching movies, we have to stick to the guidelines are on the movie. So if it says it's a 13, it's a 13. If it says it's a 12, it's a 12. You know, I've had instances, but we have to stick to it because we have to stick to the guidelines.
Yeah, I respect. And I think, as you said earlier on, the child feels safe because they know what they had before had no guideline, no
Mm.
rules, anything goes. And the minute you start, they recognize that somebody actually cares enough to start, guiding
Mm.
them. And it also helps them feel safe as well.
Sometimes they don't admit what they had was not best, but on the other hand, they still know that they're in a safe place.
Before you started having children, did you have your own child?
Yes, I have a daughter. And when I first got into care, childminder, sorry, not childminder, I used to be a childminder as well.
Oh, I
So
see.
when I
Yeah.
first started fostering, I would take any age because I was approved to look after children from 0 to 18. So I think my daughter was about 9, and I took two girls that were 10 and 12. And I remember that did not go well because they picked on her, they made her feel uncomfortable. It was not a very pleasant experience for my daughter. So from that experience, I made up my mind that I would not take children older than my daughter. So my daughter has always been the eldest child in the home with my fostering career. She's 19 now, so it doesn't matter anymore. But up until from the time I started, from that experience till date, she was always the eldest child in the house, so that she could be the influence rather than be influenced.
Yeah. So that because she's already got the discipline and the influence, so they can watch her and
Yeah,
emulate her. And so if you're telling them to do something, they can see your daughter's already doing it.
yes.
That's actually helpful. So did you find that having a child already in the house was helpful to you as a foster carer?
I found it was helpful to me, and I found that it was very helpful to my daughter as well because
Oh, okay. Tell us about that.
I think she got to see how blessed she was not having been with her birth family and the need to help the children in need. She appreciated that. And I think it made her more empathetic as a human being. And to date, she reaches out to people and she's quite empathetic. So I think it was a blessing.
And she actually welcomed them. She welcomed them into the home.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I mean there's times when she'll make dinner for them. She'll make
Oh,
breakfast. If she's making something, she'll say, "Should I make some for XYZ as well?" You know, she's very inclusive.
very
So, and
caring.
my daughter's an only child, so it helped.
Well, I think it's good because it helps her to learn to share as well, doesn't it? Because
Exactly.
otherwise, only children just don't know what it is about sharing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you started fostering, what about your family? Were your family, I'm talking about either siblings or mother or father? I haven't asked about that, but you have siblings.
Yeah, I have siblings, and my family and friends were all very supportive,
They
and
were.
they still are. Yes, they still are. Fostering is a village. It's not just, and what happens is when you're fostering, they ask you to give few names, maybe about 2 or 3 people who, in an emergency, they can look after the children for you. And so you pick people from your family and friends and they have to do the DBS checks and then they can look after the children. Sometimes when I've traveled abroad, my sister has come to stay at my house and looked after the children. My friend come and stayed and look after the children. There are times when you can, if you're really stuck and you don't have anyone, if it's an emergency, the agency or the local authority would provide respite carers. But as much as possible, I try to have friends and family look after their children because they were familiar with them. Respite carers would be people that the children are not familiar with and they've already been moved from pillar to post. So try to limit their exposure to other carers if possible.
Especially people they don't know, because it makes them feel insecure, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if I mean, they do go to respite carers now, but they've been with me for a long time, so they know the carers that I work with. They know the carers are my friends, so they'll go to those carers because we've built a community. So now they can go to those carers, and they know that it's Auntie so and so. So who am I going to this time? Auntie so and so. Yeah, so they know other carers now. But initially, when it was just when they were new, my sisters and my friends would take care of them if I needed to go anywhere.
Yes. So it makes you feel like they're within a family, the aunties and the uncles all taking part of the village that's looking after them.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you ever have a situation where, sometimes they can be challenging, sometimes they might do certain things that are quite unsociable, and they may have done it in one of your friends' homes, and so the friend might kind of pull back a bit away from them? Did you ever have a situation like that?
Yeah, I did. I had a friend who was very involved with my foster care experience, and she took them out. I think they went ice skating or somewhere like that. And I think they were a bit naughty, to say the least. And she had gone with a group of other people, and these particular children, I think they just really pushed a lot. They weren't listening, they were rough. So the next year when they were going ice skating, her friend said, "Could you not bring
So and so.
so and so?" And I was very disappointed, to be honest with you, but it is what it is. These things happen.
Did the children find out? Did the children know about that? You didn't tell them. You protected them from it. That was the only experience you had.
I've
They're
had
very
quite a
lucky.
few. No. I've had quite a few. That's just one experience. I've had people who actually stopped visiting so often because they didn't want
The influence.
the influence, which is fine. They didn't want their influence on their children, but that's fine. That's how they choose to. But then I've had people who, overlook it and see the need and they support regardless. And then, I have one particular friend, she's got boys, her sons are all boys. So she particularly encourages me to bring the boys that I have to her house so that her sons could be mentors.
Wonderful. That's
Yeah,
that's
we
really
always say,
fantastic.
bring them around, let them come around, So that, it swings and roundabouts. You're always going to get different opinions everywhere with everything. So it's a journey. Like it just goes back to being child-centered and always protecting the child and, doing what's best for the child. They've already been through a lot. They come with a lot, and it's just baby steps.
The fact that you're standing up for them is remarkable. The fact that you're protecting them from people who may not like them is very, very important. And for those children who come to you, who are obvious that they are not adopted, like you might have a child who's placed with you who's white, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when it happens like that, how do you manage that one?
You don't. You just get on with it. Children are children. I had two children that were blonde, very beautiful blonde hair children, and I'll be walking with them, and we used to turn heads all the time, because they'll be, Auntie Suzy, can I do this? I took them to Butlins, and people would see me in Butlins walking around with these two children, and we'll be at breakfast together. So and everyone was just looking. But they're children. You look after them. Obviously, you have to also bear in mind their heritage. So when you're looking after children that do not come from the same heritage as you have to bear in mind their needs, how to wash their hair daily if it's required, because we as Black people, we don't wash our hair daily. But then European hair, sometimes you need to wash it more often, so you have to do that. They don't like spicy food, so we cook separate foods from what they would eat, things like that. It just really promotes whatever culture they come from.
Is that something that you found easy to do? Because it wouldn't just be maybe a white English person. You might have a child who's from the Arab world or from a different religion or something. How have you gone about promoting their culture or their religion? What have you done? Have you had to deal with that?
No, I haven't. I haven't had any children Muslim or Islamic heritage or anything like that before. But I know carers who have, and you can work with them, especially when they're older children. They will teach you. They will teach you what they like. You can go shopping with them, and they'll show you what they like, and you can work around. I mean, YouTube is resourceful. You can find people in their community that will teach you how to do specific things in their culture. So, I mean, there's always support, there's always resources, and you just have to want to do it. You just have to want to go that extra mile,
Yeah.
which as a foster carer, you should be doing.
Yeah. And it means that you have to introduce into your own life a lot of things that are alien to you, but you
Yeah.
have to be willing and able to do it. And is that something you found easy enough to do?
Sometimes it's challenging, you know, sometimes it can be challenging, but once again, I would always go back to being child-centered. You need to do what you can do to provide a holistic care for that child. So you do have to go the extra mile. That's what we're here for,
Yeah.
is to give the child the best resources that we can give, the best support we can give, so that they can thrive.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
When a child has worked on you and you find you're at the end of your tether, for instance, what do you do? Do you have support? Do they give you therapy to support you through some of those difficult times?
I can tell you about that.
Wow, okay, okay.
Okay, so always I have a superb social worker, and I think that building a good working relationship with the social worker and the professional around the child, super important, and they will support you in ways that you will not believe if you are able to have that relationship. I
Well,
mean,
that sounds like music.
yeah,
That's wonderful.
my social workers have all been amazing, very supportive. And so I really use them. What I do is I keep them informed of everything that's going on. If something happens, I would send a quick email. So when they get up in the morning, when they know. So my social workers are so involved and so informed that when I come with a problem, we're all on the same page. It's
Okay.
ongoing.
So the communication is fluid.
It's very important, and it safeguards everyone as well. So it's very, you have to be an advocate. I've had children that are very difficult, and I have made the local authority provide services that are very unique to them. But I've championed it, I've advocated and got the services for them to support them. I've had mentoring put in place, therapy put in place, what needs to be done. Sometimes you can't wait for CAMS. Sometimes you've just got to go for it.
Yeah, and so you just go for it. And no wonder the children will look back on you and think you've really done a good job with them. Well done. And so right now, what's next? I mean, obviously you're still fostering, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm still fostering. My children are coming to the end of the fostering life, should I say. So, yeah, I don't know if I'll continue. I've been doing it for a long time, so I don't know if I'll continue. But if I do, yeah, we'll just wait and see who else we can help.
That's
But it's
lovely.
important. It's a worthwhile thing to do. I do go to, oh, I haven't done it in a while, but I do go to shopping centres and promote fostering. I think it's really important.
How do you tell us? How do you do
We have stands. We have
that?
stands in shopping centres, and we just speak to passers-by and introduce ourselves, give them leaflets. Some people sign up. We have stands, and it's important for foster carers to speak about fostering because we're living it. So if we can do it, there's hope, and
And
it encourages people.
do it. One of the that I haven't asked you is where you have to promote contact with a child's family. And this can be a very difficult thing because sometimes the children have come from maybe families where perhaps it's because of the difficulties that the families put onto the children that the kids are in the care system. How do you manage contact in those situations?
Contact is court ordered. So if the court deems it fit for children to have contact, then we have to make sure that we put that in place. There are times when you think it's not the best thing for the child because it disrupts them, but there's not much you can do about it. You can communicate with the social worker. They can make changes. If they feel that it's not good, they can have it looked at again and reassess. But generally, with contacts, I see it as a long-term benefit. Children are in care for a very short time. By 18, most of them are gone. When they leave care, they most probably, if they have contact with their birth family or if they know their birth family, would want to go back and have some sort of relationship. If they haven't had contact and relationship bond is not developed as it should do. So when it is safe to do so and when ordered to do so by the social worker, when that's part of the care plan, I do try to work with the birth families. It's important for the children to see that I get on with the birth families, that I respect their birth families. to promote that relationship. So it can work in whichever way it can work. Because when they're 18, the more they are able to build a relationship with their birth family, the more they're able to cope with the relationship after they're 18 and post 18.
That's a very beautiful thing to hear. The fact that you're promoting it because you know that when they leave, they still have to have a relationship with the family. And I think that's very, very important, because a lot of people forget that it doesn't matter how bad people would judge the family. That is the child's family, regardless. And they love them. And therefore, who are we to try to get in the way of, whatever the situation is, it's our duty to make sure that we promote that. And thank you for doing that, because that's something that we all need to keep hearing all the time, because we are so quick to judge people that we forget that the human relationship is actually more important than that. Yeah.
I'll tell you another side of it as well. I've had children who I've looked after who have been adopted, and they were moved from their mother to a carer, and then from that carer to me, and then from me to the adoptive family. And these children, both of them are not 10 yet. So you could imagine.
Quite a few changes. Yeah.
But what their adoptive parents do is they keep in touch with me so that the children know that I haven't abandoned them, that I haven't left them.
How long have they been gone?
5 years.
And they're still in touch.
Yes, they are.
Wonderful. That's
just, we,
and
do,
they look.
we visit them, and I'm due to visit them this summer, actually. I don't visit them as often as I used to, so maybe once a year. Then I'll send a video on their birthday.
That's lovely. That's really lovely. That's incredible. So what advice would you give to anybody out there who has heard about fostering? But first of all, let me ask you to give us the definition. What exactly is fostering? Tell us that. That's important.
Fostering is when you provide a home for a child who has, in one way or another, suffered abuse or been, neglect is abuse as well, or been neglected, or their parents are not able to look after them. It could be sometimes they have health issues. It could be sometimes they have to travel and there's no members of their immediate family that can be identified to look after them. So the local authority then will place them in a foster home. Also, another aspect of fostering that people don't realize is asylum seekers, accompanied minors. They all are looked after under the fostering umbrella. So there's different types of fostering one can do. And there are some people who just look after asylum seekers. That's what they want to do. We have unaccompanied minors that turn up at our airports, and foster carers, and they're placed with foster carers. So it's just really providing a safe home for a child who needs it. It's that simple.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to mention the fact that, so when a child finds himself in that situation, that child then belongs to the local authority. So then the foster carer is looking after the child for the local authority, which is why the local authority or the agency are the ones who would pay you, because they do remunerate you for that, don't they? They would pay you for looking after the children for them.
You're given what we call an allowance.
An allowance, I see, sorry.
Yeah, the allowance covers the costs of looking after the child. So, part of that allowance you would use for their clothing, for their leisure, food, just any need of the child. If they have extracurricular activities, sometimes you would pay out of your allowance. Sometimes the school will subsidize it as well. So there is a lot of support. I try to make sure that my children do much, keep them busy.
That's good. And I'm sure that works for them as well. The advice that I want you to say now, what's the advice that you want to give to people out there who may be thinking about it, fostering?
I think you should go for it. The fact that you're thinking about it says that there's something in you. And there's so many children out there who need to be looked after, especially in the ethnic minority community. So if you're thinking about fostering, go through the application. There's so much support. You make great friends. You help children. It's just a really worthwhile thing to do. And I would really, really encourage you to just go for it. Go speak to a social worker, speak to somebody, contact, and she can point you to the right direction. Contact your local authority. There's loads of agencies around as well that you can contact. And so there's so much information out there, so much support, and it's really worthwhile. So just go for it.
Fantastic. And it's also very rewarding. That's the most important thing. And I think also the fact that knowing that you're creating value in the community, you're changing children's lives, that is important. Thank you. I really honor you for the extraordinary work you're doing. People don't recognize what goes into fostering, especially when you're able to turn a child's life around, a child who may come from a home where the parents don't know any better. Circumstances are such that they don't know any better, and therefore the children are not given a chance. And when they come to you, like your best friend, whose foster carer brought such good out of her that she said it transformed her life, that's just exactly what you wish for any foster carer. And I hope and thank you for being a foster carer like that as well. You know, we're going to have you come back again, Suzy, so you can share some more information about foster care. But I want to say thank you so much for what you're doing. I want to thank you for encouraging more people to come forward to foster. Thank you, Suzy, for coming to join us on Adoption Dialogue today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for this platform. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzy, for that wonderful discussion. You shared a lot about fostering, and I know that a lot of people in our audience today would have questions that they'd like to ask you. Do any of you want to ask any questions of Suzy from the interview? Somebody's asking what the difference between fostering and adoption is. Suzy, do you want to take that question?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Adoption is long term. So when you adopt a child, you take full parental responsibility for that child. However, when you're fostering, the local authority holds the parental responsibility, sometimes with the actual birth family as well. So that's the main difference, is that once you adopt a child, you hold parental responsibility. But when you are fostering, parental responsibility resides with the local authority in conjunction sometimes with the birth family.
So basically what you're saying is that the fostering is temporary. When children are not able to be looked after by their birth family, that local authority then takes ownership of the child. Now you see in other countries like Ghana and other developing countries, it's the extended family that take ownership of the child. But in countries like here where that doesn't happen, the local authority then takes ownership of a child. So that means that if the child is not able to be looked after by their birth family, the local authority has to find a way of looking after them. But because it is an entity and not a human being, it has to employ families within its authority to care for these children on its behalf. So that's what fostering is about. So that's why they will employ a foster carer to look after the child for them and remunerate them for looking after the child. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to adoption, adoption is actually giving the child a permanent home. And even though people would think that at the age of 18 they can go back to parents, that's not what it is. Because with fostering, after 18, you're done with fostering, the child can go back. They're on their own. They can go back to their birth family. When you adopt in England, and that's where it should be all around the world, the child becomes permanently yours. They sever all relationship with their birth family and they become your family. And people would ask, what if their birth parents came along somewhere along the line and said, I want to claim my child? Well, the laws in England on adoption are irreversible. They can't. It's as simple as that. The child is placed with you, you adopt the child, and the child is yours. And that's it. And it's really because some of these children are so young, it's better for them to have they'll have better life chances if they're given a family that can care for them as their own and give them a safe home, and ideally a home where they can feel a sense of belonging. And that's the difference between fostering and adoption. I hope that answered your question. We've got another question on the chat that's asking you actually, have you ever regretted going to fostering, Suzy?
Never. It's very challenging. It can be very challenging. And but at the end of the day, you're helping children who are going to be in our communities. So you can never regret that. Helping children is not something that one regrets. It is very challenging, very difficult. Sometimes you want to tear your hair out and know when to seek help. But in terms of regretting, never, because you're also blessed by it. It's not a one-way street. It's not like I'm just doing it for them. We are also blessed by the process. My daughter is an only child, so she benefited from having other children in the house in terms of learning to share, and just not being so self-centered. So why would you? They're children. You're helping children.
Yeah, I agree. And I suppose somebody would ask me the same question if I have ever regretted adopting. Never. I've never, ever
No.
regretted it because I think what it's done, sometimes I just think it's actually done more for me than even for the children because it gave me an opportunity to mature in another way, another direction that would never have come to me. Another level of maturity that is so enriching in my life. And I look at my life today, and actually everything I'm doing right now is actually happening from the basis of having adopted my children. So it's really turned my life around. It literally is the most life-changing experience of my life and very rewarding as well. So thank you very much for that question. We've got another question here that says, how much notice are you given before a child is placed with you, Suzy?
Sometimes we have emergency placements, so you could be sleeping in the middle of the night and you get a call to say we have children that have been removed, they need a place, and can you take them? Sometimes it's a bit more structured where you'll be given a profile of the child and their background, and then they match the child's need with your need. So sometimes it's more structured, but if it's an emergency, then it's immediate. You don't get any notice.
Really?
You meet the need.
So do you have a choice then of having children placed with you on a short-term or long-term basis?
There are people who do respite care and they only do respite care, or they would take emergency children on until more long-term care is found for them. So there are people who do short-term caring. I do both. So if I'm available for short-term, I will. I've been a respite carer when other carers have been on holiday because I had vacancy. But the last year, my placement is permanent.
Right. That's when you say permanent. How do you mean permanent? Your last placement? You mean till the age of 18? Is it?
Yeah,
Ah, right. Okay. So then at 18 they move on.
yeah. They can do what you call staying put. Staying put is that they're 18, they're adults, but because they're going to go into maybe university, they want to stay with you until they finish that process so they can stay up to they're 21. But obviously, they're not children anymore. So it's a different team in the local authority that would manage the fostering after 18. No, they can stay with me,
Uh-huh.
but the rules change in terms of the structure that how you look after them because they're no longer children. They're 18, they're adults now. So different rules apply to them. So it's a different team. I can't remember what the name of the team is called.
Yeah. But it's teams. In other words, there's a little bit more freedom for them.
Yeah,
Preparing them for adulthood, isn't it? For them
yeah,
to.
that's right.
So another question: what advice will you give somebody who's considering fostering a child who is not the same race? That's the question. Yeah.
Children are children. I've fostered children with blonde hair, blue eyes. So children are children. Once you're looking after children, you don't see color, you don't see anything. You just see the child that's in front of you. I took my blonde haired children to Butlins and everyone was looking at us like, oh, what are they doing with them? Who are they? But children are children. They're no different from black children. The only thing is that when you're on the street, people will look as if, people will question, like, they can see that there's a difference. But apart from that, there's no difference. And like I said, you also have to pay close attention to their background. If they don't eat spicy food, then you prefer different meals for them. But you'll be surprised. Sometimes I had a child, this very, very sweet child. She's English. And she'll come and I'm cooking okra stew. She'll go, Aunt Suzy, can I try that, please? So it's fun. Just go for it. Doesn't
Yeah.
make a difference.
I think what's important as well when you're looking at somebody in a different race is to be prepared to adopt their culture into your home and not to isolate them. And
Yeah.
the tendency is for us to try to give them our culture and impose our culture on them. But we must understand that it's a temporary place, and as much of their original way of being should be retained as much as is possible. So that's one thing that people have to keep in mind. Also, the another question says, how many of the children you fostered in the past have been adopted?
The only ones that moved on, only two, they were siblings, and they were young. So they moved on to adoptive homes, and they were 5 years ago, and I think they were 4 and 2, I think,
Yeah.
when they left, something like that.
Because the tendency is that when a child up to 4 or 5 years old, when children are between the ages of 0 to 5, it's better for them to be placed in a home, permanent home, where they can actually have a family to look after them until adulthood. Because the whole idea of being in foster is temporary, and it's just not a very good option for children who are that young. There's another very burning question, because I have a burning question. With foster children and adolescents, it is no secret many experience deterioration in social well-being, i.e., anxiety, phobias, paranoia, disorders, and fluctuating mannerisms. How do you generally handle children with these fluctuating trust temperaments? As an example, would you concentrate on their immediate tasks to help them keep them focused? So, what the person is asking is that because a lot of children, especially when children and adolescents, when they're getting into adolescent years, many of them have a lot of issues, the anxiety, phobias, paranoia, and the like. And the questions he's asking is, would you concentrate on dealing with those particular issues, or you just deal with their immediate needs, day-to-day needs, and tasks at hand, just to keep them focused on life?
There's no one hard and fast rule for children. You treat children individually. So depending on the child, you have particular need, and their behavior will determine how you will handle them. And what you've also got to remember, which I said, is that number one, we have a lot of training. So if you have a child with a certain need, the likelihood is you would have been well equipped with training. You will have specialist training. I've had children that pose challenging behavior, and my agency has thoughts training for me where it would just be me and the trainer. They've given me one-to-one training to deal with the children, to help the children. So if you have children with specific needs, you would be trained and you would be guided specifically for that need. So that question I cannot answer because I don't know what specifically the children's need would be. But that would be something that if you had that situation, you would work closely with social workers, they would get therapy, with whoever you need, you would have to advocate to get the children that help.
Yeah, and you see, thank you, Suzy. That's important because CAMS is actually Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, and it's mental health services for children. So when, as a foster parent, you come across children like that, you would work closely with your foster carer so that they can make sure the child gets the help, the therapy that they need. And you see, that's what Suzy was talking earlier on about being a great advocate for the children that she had. She didn't just let them, if she felt they needed something, she would hound the local authority until they got it because she knew they needed it, to help them manage their lives. We have another question. Have you ever experienced a child being violent towards you?
No.
But do you know of any foster carers who have had?
I do.
And can you give an example of how it has happened and how they've handled it?
For that particular foster care, the children had been with them for a long time, and the children were like their own children. So the children stayed. They didn't sort of leave. Weren't asked to leave or anything like that because they knew the children and they knew the children's needs. So they worked through it with them. But yeah, I haven't had that.
That's a real commitment, a huge undertaking to be able to put up with that violence from a child like that and not turn your back on.
But I have to say, the child was young. It wasn't like a teenager. It
Okay,
was
is it like a kind of a
a
tantrum?
child. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think one
yeah,
was
yeah.
a teenager, but then she had been with the carer for so long. So it wasn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't dangerous, but it was close to home. They were family,
Yeah,
and she just lost it. I don't know if she would have lost it if it was her own mum. Do you know what I mean? Because she did
I get
see
what
the
you mean.
foster as her mum. And
Yeah.
the other child, it was a child, which was about 10 or 11, something
All
like
right.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I suppose when that situation happens, you deal with it as you see fit because you always call for help anyway. There's always help
that's right.
available, as you said. Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Does anybody have any more questions? So tell us, Suzy, do you have anything? Do you have any last comments that you'd like to make on this one?
As I said in the video, we do need more Black and ethnic minorities. We need foster carers, full stop. So if you're thinking about it and you have the space in your life for it, I would encourage you to sign up because you can give so much to a child. And what you've got to remember is that children in care are going to be adults in our society in the future. So we all have a responsibility to put in and help them because it's going to affect you one way or another. You know, sometimes people think that children in care do not affect them, but then your grandchildren or your children could be sitting in class with them. You could end up working with them. They're in our communities and it's a village. So if you can help, if you can sign up, it's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's all roses. It's not. It's challenging, but it's also very worthwhile.
Yeah.
You're sowing into a life.
There's nothing like sowing into a human being's life. And
That's
no
right.
matter what, you can't throw a human being away. And I
That's
really
right.
see this with children. You know, when you think about kids who, and one thing that it's useful for everybody to be aware of is you're transforming a whole life. Even if it's just one life, it's worth it. Because, the alternative to that is tragic. Kids like this end up heading straight into the criminal justice system because they had no one to care for them properly. What a waste. And that same child, given the opportunity, might become a head of state of a country. In fact, one of those children was the person who started, he was one of those children who was given an opportunity, and look what he set up. So you recognize that the investment in a human being's life, not only is it life transforming for you, but it's life transforming for the child and potentially for the world. Suzy, your interview has been incredible, and I really want to say thank you for sharing it such a frank and honest discussion with us, and also sharing what I would say is very good practice, but also practical and something that can be easily accomplished. So thank you for that. And if there are anybody here on this chat right now who feels that you're interested in adoption or fostering, please contact us. Our email address is adoptiondialogue@gmail.com. And we also have our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com / adoption dialogue. And you go there and you can see all the other videos that we've had in the past, all of which are very, very educational. Every time Judith and I have a show, we come away having learned so much from it. So I really want to say a very big thank you to you. And Dr. Arnold is here. We had one of the most insightful interviews with her. And if you happen to go onto our chat, you really do need to listen to it because she talks again about our community and how we have the barrel children. There were barrel children from the Caribbean, and she was one of the leading people who got people to understand that Black children actually need to have a different kind of therapy that is much more suited to their heritage, their background, and their personal background, experience, their cultural experiences. So we owe a lot to Dr. Arnold, and I'm so grateful that you're here with us today, Dr. Arnold. Thank you for coming. Really, it's a pleasure to see you again. Well, look, thank you all very much for joining us for Adoption Dialogue today. It's been a pleasure. We'll be joining you all again next month, the third Sunday. And in the meantime, check us out. Subscribe to our channel at Adoption Dialogue on YouTube. And please tune in, sign up. And if you're interested in becoming an adoptive parent or a foster carer, get in touch with us. We will guide you, hold your hand, and walk you through the process. And last but not the least, I really have to say a very big thank you to Suzy. Thank you, Suzy, for making the time to come and talk to us, share your experiences so honestly and so candidly. And you're very knowledgeable about what you do, and it's refreshing to hear a foster carer who has a complete and thorough understanding of what she's doing and the purpose for which you're doing it. So thank you.
Pleasure.
I like what one of your children said, you were but fair. And I think that's what anyone looking after children or anyone who needs care should be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Fair, but
Absolutely.
firm.
Yeah.
No
Absolutely.
point being wishy-washy.
Yeah, and that's what they need, because I mean they should know that the background they came from was wishy-washy, which is why they ended up in care. And
Yeah.
therefore the best thing you can do for them is to be firm and fair. Mary, how are you?
Just to say thank you.
Oh, you're
Thank you
welcome.
very much. It's very, very educative. Very, very educative.
Thank you,
At least
Mary.
we can use the information to, have conversations.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you. You're most
Bye,
welcome.
Sally.
I want to say thank you to all of you for coming. Have a very lovely evening and a wonderful week. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. To all adopted people around the world, I dedicate the song Desiderata by Les Crane.
And remember what peace
It's a
there may
powerful,
be.
life-changing poem for hard times, which inspires hope for all who hear it. My message to all adoptees is summed up in the chorus. You are a child of the universe. No less than the trees and stars, you have a right to be here. And whether or not it's clear to you, no doubt, the universe is unfolding as it should, and you have a unique and very important part to play in it. So stay strong, positive and focused, and you will thrive. I want to thank you all for joining us at Adoption Dialogue. If you have any questions or comments, send it to us at adoptiondialogue@gmail.com or drop it in the comments section of our social media platforms with the handle Adoption Dialogue without the UE at the end of dialogue. Thank you again. Stay tuned for our next episode on social media. Bye for now and stay blessed.